All right, so we're back here on another round of draft, season 1, episode 4. Tonight, we're going to be talking about the most fundamental two positions that are needed and that are crucial in the NFL. In order for you to build a successful franchise, you must have a great offensive line and a great defensive line. So I got my guy here, James from Bars Talk, another fellow Off the Ball Network colleague of mine.
How you
So we're
doing,
here.
Coach?
I'm good. And also another NFC East brethren of mine from the tri-state area.
I'm still salty about it, Coach. I still curse the Eagles every night before I go to sleep.
All I gotta say is thank you, Doug, for the senior night. Definitely appreciate that. Shout out to Nate and Doug, and thanks for senior night. We definitely appreciate it.
One of these days, I'm gonna drive up to that field and just start spitting at the statue that's still there of him.
Yes, absolutely. And it's funny, before we get into our talk, we're going to start first with the offensive line. And it's funny, today has been a very interesting day when we look at from the offensive line standpoint, where essentially the Kansas City Chiefs cleared house, essentially getting rid of the former number 1 overall pick, Eric Fisher, and Schwartz, Mitchell Schwartz, which clears them up with $18 million in cap space, which is an interesting thing. And they could be potential players when we talk about these offensive linemen in this segment. These guys might potentially be on this Kansas City Chiefs team. And one thing before we get started, and the beauty about this offensive line class is weird because doing a little copious research, a lot of these guys are hybrids, and I think that it's just going to be almost like where you can plug in guys at any spots. Where it used to be well, he's a left tackle, he's a right tackle. I mean, these guys can play tackle, guard, center. They can plug and play. So with that, yeah.
I couldn't agree with you more, Coach, on honestly every point you just made. Literally, due to COVID, a lot of these guys took the opportunity of opt-outs to switch positions, going from interior to left tackle or right tackle, because everyone knows tackles where the big bucks are when you're playing offensive line. So due to some of these already players who knew they were going to go in the first round, they opted out, decided to play it safe. You had these other players who actually rise their draft stock and actually made them go from their day 3 pick to now a day 1 pick, possibly, or even an early day 2 pick. The craziest thing about this draft to me is there's not a lot of talent here aside from I'm going to tell you about the first 3 or 4 guys who really pop off from the book. There's not a lot of talent, but there actually is a lot of talent, as crazy and contradictory as that sounds. It's a deep draft. You're not having a lot of Pro Bowlers coming out, but you're definitely having guys who you can plug in almost immediately who are going to help your franchise for a couple years and be good starters.
Big time. So that leads to my first question of the night for you. Who's our top 5 offensive linemen in this year's draft?
All right. Well, with number 1, I think everyone knows it's my man Penny Sewell. This guy, if it wasn't for Trevor Lawrence, he honestly could have been the number 1 pick. He could go anywhere in the draft, and there would be no argument. This guy is plug and play for the next 10, 12 years. He's 6'6", 320. He's perfect in the interior. He could run exterior. He's a big man who's agile, and his hips are always loose. He got what I like saying is he got sweet feet, and that's honestly what makes any lineman a good lineman. You can have good hands, but if you're able to rotate your feet and get around, defend yourself to help protect your quarterback, that's what makes you truly a great one. For number 2, I got Rashaan Slater. What's a little confusing for me here is everyone, they've been throwing him up all the way to top 10 to all the way to the bottom of the first round or even day 2. And I don't get why. This guy has shown us. And all right, I take that back. Everyone's kind of holding this like almost Eric Flowers thing against him, that he could play tackle, but he has short arms. So for some reason that should drop him in the draft. But no, this guy has shown he can play center. He can play left guard, left tackle. He's the most versatile offensive lineman in this draft, I feel like. So for number 3, I have Elijah Vera Tucker. He's coming in at 6'4", 314. This guy's a little more raw than both the other two guys I mentioned, but honestly, he has the potential to possibly be one of the best tackles coming out of this draft. He switched from the interior, again, another versatile guy already in the first three guys we named. He switched from the interior to the left tackle this year. He took over where I believe it was Austin Jackson, or was that Jedrick Wells? My apologies for the mix-up. But
Austin Jackson, yeah.
Austin Jackson, right? Yeah. So he left the left tackle spot for him at USC, opened it up for him, and he took over, and he's looked great. The only issue for Tucker is his inexperience, which is really hurting his draft stock a lot. For number 4, I have Jaylen Mayfield, tackle coming out of Michigan, another guy who doesn't have a lot of experience. He actually only started in 15 of the 18 games he's played, and he's really raw, almost like clay, basically. But that just shows the pure talent this guy is oozing out right now. He shows good instincts and burst, and he's one of those offensive linemen. When they're blocking, he holds it past the first whistle. He even holds it past the second whistle that time, and that's the type of guys you want. You want guys who are just dogs down there in the trenches, because they don't call them hog mollies for nothing, coach. You got to get in there. You got to get muddy. You got to get dirty. You got to do what you got to do to protect the quarterback. He would have been a top 10 pick next year, some are saying, but he decided going to the league this year, and I don't blame him. He's a real skills. His skills are really scheme friendly. He's almost depending in what system you put him in, he's an automatic plug and play at right tackle or anywhere in the interior. Some say he needs a little more training for his potential to reach that left tackle position. And no, go ahead, coach.
No, you go. Yeah.
I was just going to mention my 5th. If you want to mention Mayfield,
you're 5th. No, you're 5th. No, you good.
And my 5th guy is Christian Darashaw, coming out of Virginia Tech. He's 6'5", 314. He's really improved in each of his 3 seasons in Virginia Tech. He got all ACC honors this past year. And he's really just another unique athlete who's flexible with his hips. He's He's especially good on the outside zone schemes. He's a great run blocker, but his pass blocking needs a lot of help because he tends to have this bad habit where he uses his waist to lean forward. Kind of I always like pointing at Eric Flowers for bad habits, because that's all he had as an offensive lineman was bad habits he could never get rid of. So he kind of has the bad habit like Eric Flowers had, where he would lean forward instead of bend his knees. But with good coaching, that's another, I feel, issue that's easily fixable.
Shout out to Eric Flowers. he had a cup of coffee in Washington, so definitely shout out to Eric Flowers. We definitely need them in that horrid 2019 season of ours. So, as far as with these, do you see any? Besides Eric Flowers, do you see any pro comparisons to these particular offensive linemen that were mentioned?
For Sewell, I feel like you're gonna appreciate this one. I feel like he's almost like a Trent Williams, just the way he plays it. He just played, like I said, it's the sweet feet. Trent Williams got the same thing, and that's really what makes a lineman last long and last throughout this league. If you're not feeling like he's a Trent Williams, he's more of like a Quentin Nelson, I feel like, also, with just the aggressiveness and the leadership he brings into the trenches. For Slater, his pro comparison I have is, for Slater, his pro comparison I have is more like a David Bakhtiari, just for the way he plays that offensive tackle position. He likes getting in there dirty. Bakhtiari wasn't really... When he came out, he wasn't a great offensive lineman, but he became great, just like Slater was. For my number 3, which was Tucker, I have him as... Sorry about that, coach. I have him as Jedrick Wells, actually. I have him just as the guy he replaced, just because I'm not Jedrick Wells. I'm just like Jedrick Wells of the Browns. Coach, you know what? You set such a high level of bar right here that I'm trying to match this info, because I do nothing but respect your football takes. You see it, the nerves, the jitters right now.
It's all good,
it's a
lot
right now.
Hey, it's all good, man. We having good time talking about the draft. It's good times, man.
But yeah. So, and for my number 4 guy, Jaylen Mayfield, I have him compared to Deion Dawkins, with the way he could play the interior, I feel like he would just it's a plug and play. Like I said, depending on the scheme he's in. And then for my number 5 guy, Jenkins, I also have him. Not Tevin Jenkins, sorry. Christian Darashaw, I have him as a Garrett Bowles, who's another guy who wasn't really that good when he came into the league. But as you've seen now with this past 2020 year, he's become great. He's a great tackle. It might have been because it was a contract year. It's usually how it works out in the NFL. But he's somebody who has that potential and could be a plug-and-play starter in the league as well.
Absolutely. And definitely, before we move on, definitely got to give a huge shout out to the podfather, our guy, Jeff Hunt. Good question. So I'm curious, do you guys still believe there's a difference between a right and left tackle importance? I'm going to go with you first.
I'm glad you asked that, Jeff. I'm one of the few people who think there is. I don't really get why people say you could just plug and play someone from left to right. You could, but it doesn't mean they're going to be the same ability of a player from left to right. Think about it. There's a big difference when you're trying to write your name with your left hand and you're trying to write your name with your right hand, depending on what you are. You're using 2 different sides of your brains. So yes, you could be a good player on both sides of the wall, but there's going to be an obvious position where you're much better at and your skills are going to show much better. I feel right tackle is more for the run blockers, the guys who like getting down and dirty, and left tackle is where you need to put your prime position guys to protect your quarterback's back.
Yeah, and you know what's funny? And I'm glad that Jeff brought that up because I was screaming to the high hills like the Jets need to get Sewell and team him up with Mekhi Becton, and they just figure it out. But like you said, those are 2, and I look at those are just 2 massive guys, generational massive guys who, like you said, could you think about it? Would you move Mekhi to the right? Or would he still be the left tackle? I mean, that's the thing. That's the thing where, and I'm glad Jeff brought up that point because there is an importance, but then a part of you think to yourself, if you had like the Jet situation and they were at number 2, that you would figure it out. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you got those 2 guys there, you're gonna figure it out. So there is an importance, especially it just depends. Like, and I think using that to comparison, these are 2 different types of guys. Like, I think those 2 guys together, regardless of where they at, they'll take care of business. But like you said, I think if they're more like not polished per se, and it's funny because we look at like the Kansas City situation where you look at like what was it, Render? I think was it Render? No, it was, I forgot who was the guy that they had. The one that played for Carolina that Von Miller ate up in the Super Bowl. I forgot his name.
I was tearing him apart. You know I was.
Because essentially
the guy that JPP forgot.
yeah, essentially. And he was like a hybrid, the one that we kind of talked about earlier. But if he just stick into one primary spot, would that definitely help? And I think it's really if you have a team that's like versatile in that kind of way where multiple guys can play in multiple spots. But if you got a guy that especially as a left tackle, and then you got to bring in another guy who especially as a left tackle, then that's when the importance really come into it. So kind of 2 ends of the spectrum where you look at if the Jets were to pull the trigger on it, which I think they should, but that's just here nor there. We'll probably discuss more about that as the Round and Drive podcast progressed in the month of April. But so let's get this one. So which O-lineman, in your opinion, do you think will have the most likely of an immediate impact this season? Almost like a Tristan Wirfs type of impact.
The number 1 O-lineman has to be Sewell, just because he's gonna dominate when he comes into the league. It's gonna look like he's played the position already for almost 5 years. But besides Sewell, I would say the next lineman to have the most immediate impact would definitely be Rashaan Slater, just because his versatility. Really, any team who needs offensive lineman help can draft him. The Pittsburgh Steelers could draft him. Washington could draft him. I know Washington was taken in the Off the Ball Network mock draft here, and you were excited about that, just a joke.
Yeah.
And I don't understand how he dropped down to 20. But hopefully that changes this Friday. You're going to see a lot of the names I mentioned, hopefully, Pat, going off the board towards the end of this draft. Because there's anything this Super Bowl taught us is you can never have, one, enough cheap old linemen who are great, and two, enough depth, no matter what. Because as you see with Kansas City, they lost almost 5-6 linemen throughout the entire year. And shout out to Mike Remmers, coach. That was
Mike Remmers, Mike Remmers, yes.
Who was getting rocked in the Super Bowl. But yeah, definitely I see it's going to be Sewell and Slater and possibly Tucker. Tucker, I think, is going to, like I said, he has the potential to be the best tackle here. I'm getting kind of, just with his athletic versatility and his size, I'm getting kind of like these Ronnie Stanley vibes also. I didn't give him that pro comp, but he's one of those tackles who could move quick. You're going to see him make that first tackle, and then he's going to go off the left and clear up an open lane for your quarterback, your running back, or set up a screen beautifully for you. So between those two, I think they're about to walk in and just, it's going to look great for whoever takes them.
Yeah, and that's funny. Like we talked about the mock draft from last week, and like you said, and even to Jerry's point last week, where you sit and you think, because I think they had in the like the first 10 of the draft, I think they put Sewell going to Cincinnati at 5, and then Slater was the next offensive lineman taken at 19 with us at Washington. Mm-hmm. And it kind of posed a good question where you look at, even though we know that Sewell is a generational type of talent, and then when you look at how the draft may play out, and this could be a scenario where the next lineman won't be drafted for another 15 or so picks. And that's where you look at like the disparaging of it, where you look at from the standpoint of, is Sewell just that good, or it's just how the draft plays out? So that's going to be the interesting thing. And like you said, I think wherever, like, then I think it'd be the floodgates, because we talked about other positions on the podcast a few weeks. Like, we looked at quarterbacks, and we're thinking all 5 of the guys will probably be drafted within the 15 or so picks. And this offensive line group, this is, and we also talk about the wide receivers as well, which I think they'll be kind of taken really quickly as well. But that's one thing too, when you look at, as far as the drop off between, offensive lineman number 1 versus the second one. So
yeah, the drop off is huge, and I'm glad you mentioned that number 5 pick of Sewell, because your very own was the one who actually drafted him. As you can see, I'm all about my hog mollies, coach. To me, besides quarterback, the trenches is where it's all at. This is it's not the sexy pick, but it's the pick that helps build your franchise for years to come, no matter who's your quarterback as well. But like you were saying, coach, the drop off from 1 to 2 is just phenomenal, and then after 2, I feel like everybody's just clustered together, and from there it's kind of a bin of, you try and grab whoever's potential you think is the most that's going to launch up. Because like I said, it's not a great draft for offensive linemen, but it is still a very good one, because there's a lot of guys also who opted out, who you didn't get a lot of tape of this year, and you might not even got a lot of tape of last year, but they're kind of like a Jaylen Mayfield, where they're just pure talent and you see it. Someone I'm going to mention later was actually projected as a top 10 pick if he kind of played this year, but he decided not to play it safe. And it's just, like you said, the talent it's a huge gap in between tier 1, tier 2, but then tier 3 it's a solid group of guys who could help a lot of franchises if put in the right position. Yeah,
absolutely. And, you kind of teased it. So we'll get it going now, where, who are the sleepers to watch in this offensive lineman crop in 2021?
Well, my number 1 offensive lineman, who I just mentioned, he actually only played, I believe it was 1 game in the last 2 years due to a knee injury. And that's actually going to be Walker Little, coming out of Stanford. This guy was projected off his 1 game. Well, with tape and just his full length, his size, his burst, his pure motor. He was projected as a top 10 pick if he came back early, but he decided to play it safe due to a lot of people opting out due to COVID and decided to rehab his knee to get stronger. And he's still, even without playing for almost the last 2 years, is still projected to be a day 2 pick, if not latest round 3 pick. And the next sleeper I also have is Sam Cosmi. This is a guy who started for Texas coming out. A lot of them see this guy as a plug and play. He's one of my honorable mentions. It took a lot for me not to stick him into the top 5, but a lot of scouts are seeing him more as he played tackle, but a lot of scouts are seeing him more as a guard. They like him better, thinking his size and his hips weren't really as quick, but he's almost a concrete slab when you put him there. And I actually, when I fumbled my notes a little bit, I mentioned him before. Tevin Jenkins is another guy I have high up in this draft as a sleeper. He honestly is another guy who could have been in my top 5, but due to a lower back injury he got this season, he dropped down a lot on my board and a lot of other boards because the back injury is actually very concerning. And it's worrying for injury-prone career. That might no one likes your lineman getting injured. This is a guy you need to be plug and play always. Besides your quarterback is there every day almost, or else you end up like Kansas City in the Super Bowl.
Facts. Yeah. And so let's talk about some defensive linemen in this draft. This year is not as the sexy as it was in 2020, where you had generational talents. Especially one that's done in a 9-9 in a district.
It's definitely a rough group this year, but there's some talent out there. It took a little digging, but I saw a little something.
Yeah. So, James, who you got as your top 5 defensive linemen in this class?
Well, my number 1 guy, who I just shout out to Jerg for drafting right by my New York Giants. I don't understand why the whole network was upset with this pick, but Gregory Rousseau, I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. I'm not good with the French names, but I feel he's the best pass rusher in this draft. My man had 15 and a half sacks and 2 forced fumbles in 2019. I don't know if you've seen his FSU tape. I was looking up highlights for everybody just to make sure I have my picks right. His FSU tape, this man was getting to the quarterback at will. It was honestly disgusting. He was getting triple teamed at times and still being able to grab his hand onto the quarterback and drag him down. He has a lot of inexperience for this draft, for the position. And I get why a lot of people were saying Jerg was going against his argument during the mock draft, saying he's a raw edge rusher. But he's not raw in the bad way. He's not raw like, oh, man, this guy is not an automatic starter. He's raw in a great way. He's raw like the Josh Allen potential raw. Mekhi Becton raw, Khalil Mack raw. Like, those guys were still high-value picks, and they still turned out great in their first year. When you're saying this guy is raw, you're saying he's already good. He could be a golden jacket if we could get him to become great. And he just lines up everywhere. And most of his production actually came from the inside. I see him not really, although he's the best pass rusher in this draft, I see him more of a like day 1, early to mid pick teens pick in this draft. My number 2 guy is Quiddy Payne. He's honestly, he's great. I don't got a bad thing to say about him. He's not as physically dominant as Rousseau is, but he still can be dominant. He doesn't rely on his strength like Rousseau does or his size. He actually relies a lot more on his first step. If you watch his tape, he bounces a lot. He's great with the half spins. He moves his hips a lot. I'm not one who takes a lot of these combine drills seriously, but he ran a sub 6'5" 3-cone drill at over 260 pounds. Just to give you an idea if that's good or not, the average 3-cone drill, it goes for about 7.25. So that's really, really good. He only played 4 games, but he actually had 22 pressures and 11 run stops this season, which bumped up his PFF grade from 80.9 to 86.3 this year. He's more of a mid to late teens pick in my eyes. My number 3 lineman this year is Jalen Phillips. This guy is the guy who replaced Rousseau, and he is just a physical specimen. If you think Rousseau is great, this guy makes Rousseau look tiny. He's like the DK Metcalf of edge rushers. He has the size, the burst, the length. He honestly, out of all the guys I'm naming, he probably has the best edge potential. His concerns only are really medical because he played for UCLA and he was actually forced into retirement due to he got in an accident, had to get surgery on his wrist, and he actually had 3 concussions in his career with UCLA. He took 2019 off to get into better playing shape, and he actually bumped his playing weight from 220 to 270. He was the number 1 recruit actually in his 2017 class. So in my eyes, he has the potential to be the best edge rusher in this draft, almost just like Vera Tucker has the potential to be the best tackle in the draft, but he's a little more raw than the other 2 guys I just mentioned.
Big time.
My number 4 guy is Christian Barmore. He's honestly, in my eyes, the only nose tackle, defensive tackle I see going in the first round. This is a really bad draft, in my opinion, for interior defensive linemen. I tried getting more people besides him on this list, but a lot of those guys are looking like day 2, day 3 picks. Just to prove he's good, he's a 6'5", 2'9" lineman. He's an Alabama DT. Come on now. Everyone knows Alabama does nothing but produce these linemen now. They do nothing but produce offensive line and defensive linemen. Another sleeper, actually, I didn't mention for offensive linemen is Letterwood. He's a guard for Alabama. He's going to kill it as well. But back to Barmore. He actually started this season slow, but he came better as the season went on because he started with a lingering knee injury. His best 2 games actually came in the postseason, and it was against the best 2 offensive interior line. I believe it was Notre Dame and Ohio State, I want to say. The only concern is he had a lot of meh games this year, but due to his past production and the knee injury, a lot of people believe he's going to be great. And then my last, number 5 lineman I have is Jason Owa. This guy is a lot more raw, like I said, but he's pure athletic ability. He ran a 4.4 40-yard dash at 240. If you watch his tape, he closes out open space like better than any linebacker. Better than any edge rusher that I just named. He literally in the blink of an eye could, from the moment his first move is slow, but once he gets past that offensive lineman, blink of an eye, he's right there in the quarterback's face. He's great at pressuring, and the best thing about him is actually his run defense this year jumped from 59.5 to 89.7 this year. Although he had that great improvement, I see him more as a day 2 draft pick.
Big time, big time. So any pro comparisons for these players?
My number 1 for Gregory Rousseau, I have his pro comparison as, now please don't kill me here, I have him as an Aaron Donald style player, but I'm not saying he's going to be as great as Aaron Donald. Could he be? Possibly. But it's the style of play he has, because I've seen tape of him getting double team, triple team, and he pushes these guys or gets around them and moves his legs and hips around these guys the same way Aaron Donald does. When I say Aaron Donald, I'm trying to compare him like how people are saying Zach Wilson plays like Patrick Mahomes. They're not saying he's going to be Mahomes. They're saying they look alike and they play pretty solid with each other. For Quiddy Payne, I have him as a Giants fan. I saw him playing, and it was just I fell in love with this guy as well. I see him as an O.C. Omenora, just with the way he's quick. And they actually both hail from the same mother country of Niger, I believe. It might be Nigeria. I don't want to get that wrong. My apologies if I did. But Quiddy Payne actually never heard of O.C. Omenora. That's the funny part. Yeah, exactly. He was like, a reporter actually asked him, do you know who O.C. is? And never heard of this guy once. O.C. needs to have a talk with this young man because he can make him a great player as well.
Right.
For number 3, Jalen Phillips, I have him as a I mixed that up. But for Christian Barmore, I have him as a Snacks Harrison almost. He's great at pressuring, but he's not the best at pressuring. But he is great at the run defense game. He's almost a unstoppable just slab. You put him right there in the middle, and no one's gonna get around this guy. He's gonna make sure he gets a hand on to at least slow him down until a linebacker or another lineman gets on him. And for number 3, Jalen Phillips, I have him as a. Oh no. Jalen Phillips, I have him as a comparison to a Khalil Mack. I have him as Khalil Mack, not same thing. Not he's going to reach that potential. Actually, honestly, with his size, he could reach that potential. But this man has arms longer than anything I've ever seen. The way that Jason Owa closes out on a quarterback, he does the same way, except he doesn't do it with his speed. He does it with just the straight length and his height and his burst. It's the most insane thing I've seen. This man got around people just with a swim move with ease. And then for Jason Owa, I have him as a Leonard Floyd. He's not the biggest edge rusher, but he's quick, just like Leonard Floyd was. And a lot of draft profile Leonard Floyd got was he's an aggressive edge rusher, which is just like Jason Owa is. Like I said, he could close that gap in a blink of an eye once he gets open. It's just his first move is questionable, but I believe just like Leonard Floyd, with the right coaching, as we've seen from when Leonard Floyd went from one team to another, he can have a dramatic increase and improvement in his game.
Absolutely. So, which D lineman do you think have the likely to have the an immediate impact right off the gate?
Right out the gate,
Chase Young.
Chase Young, like I would have to say, although I got Rousseau as my number 1, I think Quiddy Payne is definitely the guy who's going to have the most immediate impact right out the gate. Just the way he moves his hips and rotates and how quick he is, he has an instinct on that first step. He sees the ball without even looking in direction. He could be looking at this side, the ball's here, and he's going to time that beautifully in order to pass that lineman. So that's just something you can't teach. And he's the most complete, put together prospect out of all of these guys. And it's just with that flexibility, that's something you could grow as you get. But he's looking like an all-time pro already.
Big time. So I found a topic. What are sleepers to watch?
Sleepers to watch, I got Tyler Shelvin as my number 1 guy. This is another guy actually who plays like snacks. He's definitely gonna be a day 2, round 3, if not a early day 3 guy. But he doesn't apply a lot of pressure, but he has that flexibility where he's gonna stop any run game. Unfortunately, he's gonna be only a 3-down nose tackle, but that's somebody who you can always trust and put in there to stop any run game. The only concern with him is he had a little bit of a weight issue, but he also came from the championship LSU team before he opted out last year. So I'm sure you get him with the right staff, that weight issue is going to disappear.
Absolutely. Definitely. So definitely appreciate you for coming on this week's round of draft. Man, where can they find you on social media?
You guys can find me on social media at Bars Talks on Twitter. That's all we're at right now. I got a top secret project in the making right now. It's G9 classified. Just want to shout out my man, Jared Coney. He actually had a great interview with Rod Peterson and our very own president, Chris LeBron. Also want to apologize, Coach. I should have shaved before this thing. I should have got all nice and spiffy for you. But I forgot my manscaping razor in my job. So shout out to Manscaped also, our new sponsors here.
Yeah.
I'll be sure to look all fresh and clean for you next time. All right, Coach?
Yes, very huge.
My last thing is just keep an eye open for me, guys. I have my MLB preseason power rankings article dropping sometime this week.
Nice. Definitely appreciate that. And then also, you'll be on the mock draft tomorrow night, correct?
Yes, I will be on the map draft tomorrow night. You're going to see a lot of these names I put. You're going to see a lot of hog mollies there. If I get anywhere near that bottom 5, all 5 would be hog mollies, up to me.
Yeah, man. It was definitely fun doing it last weekend. It was fun to, put on my GM hat and then just funny, like, you know, it is funny, but the whole process is I already have like a list kind of in my mind, like, all right, who I'm gonna get. I have like 4 or 5. And then it's like everybody was taking everybody when I was taking them. Like I was like, oh boy. So this is it really felt like a war room. Literally.
You think it's bad in fantasy football? You should see this. The panic is real.
Yes. I'm over here, my little draft board. Got my little sticky notes. I'm like, oh well, he's off our board. He's off. I was like, man, we would have had trades, boy. I would have been, I'd have been Willie Dillon. I'd have been the Danny Ainge of football.
I was panicking when it was my Eagles pick. Sewell came to me at 5. It was easy. 6, I was like, oh man, everyone else I needed left.
Right. I know. And that was, I think, when I was and that when we're in the middle of it, because we did 11 through 20 or 10 through 11 through 20. And like, because I had Minnesota and I had Minnesota and Miami, and you know, so they all needed D line help. So that's how I was like, well, and I kept on. I had the guy from Alabama, which I mentioned earlier, Barmore, which I was like, well, if he performed good against against Ohio State and also Notre Dame, I like he can perform in the NFL, like. You know, having 2 games like that.
Like I said, he's a Bama lineman. I mean, I can't think of one lineman to come out of Bama that you're like, man, that guy is no good. Come on, they do nothing but produce defensive linemen.
Right, exactly. But yeah, definitely appreciate you, James, for coming through. And man, this has been another round of draft. And we'll catch you. We're gonna take a bye week because of the NCAA tournament next week. You know, so we'll be back on the 25th of March. So we'll take a bye week next week for the round of draft, and we'll catch you guys on the 25th. This has been another round of draft presented by Couch Coach Live. Man, we'll catch you guys in 2 weeks.